Senate Bill 740, a bill relating to access to electronic textbooks and adequate connectivity, reported from the Committee on Education and Health with an amendment which has been adopted, and there's a floor substitute.
The senator from Eastern Fairfax County, Senator Surovell.
Thank you, Mr. President. Having voted on the prevailing side by which we engrossed and passed on Senate Bill 740 to third reading, I would move that we reconsider that vote so that we can adopt a floor substitute to make a couple clarifications.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the vote by which Senate Bill 740 was engrossed and advanced to its third reading be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their votes? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0.
Ayes 39, noes 0. The motion is agreed to. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Thank you, Mr. President. To put the bill in a proper posture, I'd ask that we reconsider, having voted on the prevailing side by which we adopted the committee amendment, I would move that we reconsider the committee amendment.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the vote by which the committee amendment was agreed to be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their votes? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, noes 0.
Ayes 39, noes 0. The motion is agreed to. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would move the floor substitute. I'm sorry. First, I would waive reading of the floor substitute.
Senator, we have to reject the committee amendment.
I'd move that we reject the committee amendment.
Thank you, Senator. With the recommendation that it be rejected, the question is, shall the committee amendment be agreed to? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The committee amendment is rejected. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would move that we waive reading of the floor substitute.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the reading of the floor substitute be waived? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The reading of the floor substitute is waived. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would move that we adopt the floor substitute and speaking to that motion.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, the floor substitute in front of you, all it does is clarifies the intent of the subcommittee of the Committee on Education, Health, and Welfare. Just I'll point you really quick. It was the committee's intent to make clear that this bill only applied to students in a specific class that were using electronic textbooks in a class. And so we added the words "in a course" to line 51 and line 53. And then in subparagraph D, lines 58 through 67, the gentlelady from, or the senator from, the junior senator from Loudoun pointed out to me that secondary school was ambiguous. Legislative Services pointed out that secondary schools are actually not defined in the code, so I changed that word to say middle or high school 3 times. And that's all the floor substitute is different from what you saw yesterday.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Franklin County, Senator Stanley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the gentleman from Eastern Fairfax rise for a question?
Would the senator yield for a question?
I yield.
He yields, Senator.
Mr. President, I'd asked the gentleman on page 3 of his amendment, and I'd noticed it in the bill but did not get a chance to ask him, on lines 70 and 71 that there is an exemption to Henry County, which is, of course, in my district. And I was wondering if the gentleman could tell me why he's exempted Henry County from his legislation.
The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
I would say, the gentleman, that was in the original legislation. It's not any different from the floor substitute, but the reason Henry County's in there is because Delegate Byron, who was the chairman of the Broadband Commission at the time this legislation was vetted, asked that that be included because it's something they were doing in Henry County 4 years ago, and that's why it's still there. And that's the best I can answer for you.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, the senator from Petersburg, Senator Dance.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to ask a question of the patron.
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
I yield.
He yields, Senator.
I would like to ask Mr. President, the patron, if he has allowed enough time for me, since I brought up the concern yesterday from the School Board Association and the Petersburg school system. They had concerns. If he allowed me enough time to even share this recommended substitution with them.
The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would say to the gentlelady from Petersburg, or the senator from Petersburg, the substitute does not change the substance of the bill. The amendments are purely technical in nature. They don't change the substance. And so it basically doesn't change anything. And the bill has been out there. It was vetted by JCOTS 3 years ago. There was 9 hours of hearings over it. The School Board Association, all the school boards had an opportunity to hear it. It was heard in subcommittee. It was heard in full committee. The bill's been out there for 4 weeks. I've not heard from Petersburg, but given that the bill has been out there and the floor substitute doesn't change the substance, it really wouldn't serve any point in sharing it with them because it doesn't change anything.
Thank you, sir. The senator from Petersburg.
Mr. President, could I ask the patron another question?
Would the gentleman yield for an additional question? He yields, Senator.
Mr. President, I would ask him if he would simply answer my question if he had allowed me enough time to share his substitute with the two that had concerns yesterday, that is the School Board Association and the Superintendent of Schools from Petersburg, if he'd allowed me enough time. That simple question.
The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would say to the senator from Petersburg that this particular draft of the substitute was given to me at 10:54 a.m., that a prior version of it was given to me this morning at around 10 a.m., and again, it's a technical, the changes are purely technical. It doesn't change anything of substance, so I'm not sure giving it to Petersburg would really, the bill they had yesterday would be fine for them to look at if they had concerns, and the bill that's been out there for weeks would be fine as well.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I don't feel like I could, maybe I should say, Mr. President, can I ask for a yes or a no? That's what I was asking to my question.
I yield. The answer is yes.
The senator from Petersburg.
Mr. President, will the patron yield for another question?
Would the senator yield for an additional question?
Glad to.
Mr. President, I would ask the patron if by receiving this on my desk when this was delivered and not having time to even share this document with the people that expressed concerns, that he see that yes or no as adequate enough time for me to allow them to respond to the substitute. Yes or no, Mr. President?
The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would say to the senator from Petersburg that I think it's plenty of time given that it's purely technical, and so the answer is yes.
Thank you, senators. The question is, the senior senator from Loudoun, Senator Black.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the gentleman from Eastern Loudoun County, or Fairfax County, respond to a question?
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
I yield.
He yields, Senator.
First, I want to compliment the gentleman on an effort which is obviously very well intended. But I notice on both line 50 of page 2 and on 53 of page 3, we're talking about students having equal access to these, to the devices at their residence as well as at school. And I'm just wondering whether that doesn't suggest a major financial impact for the schools.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Again, the concern I think being raised isn't any different in terms of the original bill and the substitute, but happy to address it. First of all, in line 50, it simply makes a policy statement that it's the policy of the Commonwealth that textbooks approved for use, be equally accessible to children at school and in their residence. Because as I said yesterday, the Constitution of Virginia says we are required by our Constitution since 1904 to give every child a free book. That's the policy statement. And then the specifics of it are laid out in the next code section. And the way the courts tend to interpret statutes is if there's a more direct, specific version of a code section which speaks to a subject matter, you look at that instead of the broader part. And so if you go to the sentence that the gentleman pointed out on line 53 and 54, what that says is that every child shall have actual access to a computing device, both in school and in their home. It does not say anything about internet in those lines. The language about broadband is on 56 and 57, which only requires broadband at school, not in the home. And I would say to the gentleman, in terms of the cost, that electronic textbooks are cheaper. And what school systems are doing is procuring electronic textbooks and then taking the savings and spending it elsewhere instead of using the savings to purchase computing devices, which Chesterfield County and Arlington were able to procure at about $200 to $250 per child. But they're not using that savings to procure devices so that children can actually use the books. And so I would say that the fiscal impact on the school systems would be fairly minimal because the savings net out the cost of the devices for the most part. Not entirely for the most part, but I would note there's no fiscal impact statement on the bill, so there's no fiscal impact to the general fund.
I thank the gentleman. Speaking to the issue.
The senator has the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, I really do believe that many of the points that the gentleman has made are certainly appropriate. I am concerned because Jim Council, who is our school board representative from Prince William, which is a very diverse county, has expressed concern. And while I understand exactly what the gentleman is saying about ultimately the times or the cost savings in going to electronic books rather than the hard copy books, it does offer us savings. I just feel a little uneasy that there are too many elements of uncertainty at this point to move forward, and I think I'm going to have to listen to my school board on this particular issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Western.
Mr. President, parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
Have we adopted the floor substitute yet?
No, we haven't, Senator.
Okay. And further inquiry? Would it be more appropriate for the members to speak to the substance of the bill after we adopt the floor substitute instead of before, given the substitute's mainly technical?
Well, they have to vote on the floor substitute, so this is appropriate. The senator from Western Fairfax County.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the patron yield for a question?
Would the senator from Eastern Fairfax County yield for a question?
I yield.
He yields,
Thank you.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to just to clear up one thing, is that if someone has a private computing device that they want to take to school, would the school system be obligated to provide them with a free one, even though they have their own and could use their own both at school and at home? That's the question. Thank you.
Senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
I would answer the gentleman by saying that I do not believe this bill prohibits that. If you read the language of the bill, it says no school system on line 51, no school system shall require the use of an electronic book in grades 6 through 12 unless the school board adopts a plan to ensure every child has actual access in school and at home. All they have to do is adopt a plan. It does not state the school system has to buy computers. It says a plan.
Thank
you. The senator from Arlington, Senator Favola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the patron yield for a question?
Senator, yield for a question.
I yield.
He yields.
Perhaps he can enlighten me, but on line 47 of the amendment, it says, quote, adequate connectivity means bandwidth of at least 1 megabyte per second per enrolled student. Do you know what Fairfax County currently has in terms of this megabyte requirement, and how much faster would this be, and what would the expense be?
The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would answer the senator from Arlington by saying that it says 1 megabit per second, which my understanding is the equivalent of like a one-lane freeway. It's a very minor requirement, and when this was vetted in JCOTS, nobody really expressed any concern about the megabit issue. The issue, once you have a pipe into a school, it's really more about getting the pipe into the school than it is the size of the pipe, from my understanding, especially in Fairfax County.
Follow-up question, Mr. President?
Additional question?
I yield.
He yields, Senator.
Well, the Fairfax County School Board legislative liaison has come to me to state pretty forcefully that this requirement would be a significant increase over what Fairfax County currently provides and would be extraordinarily costly. Can you enlighten me on that conversation?
Senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would say to the gentlelady from Fairfax that, from Arlington, that I appreciate the fact that that my locality's lobbyist has spoken to her, not to me. But I haven't heard from him in over a year. And so to the extent my county has any issues with this bill, I'm completely unaware of them because they haven't bothered to talk to me about them. But having said that, I would find it unusual that one of the largest, wealthiest counties in the United States of America would have issues with broadband capacity in any of their schools. I would further tell the gentlelady that the state is working very diligently on this. Those of us on the Broadband Commission, gentleman from Grayson, and I can't remember, there's one other person on it, are very aware of the efforts that the state is undertaking to facilitate broadband access at our schools. There's something called the Federal E-Rate Program, which VITA is currently implementing, where they're trying to cut costs at most schools by 70% by providing the cheapest rate to every school system in the state. There's about $2 billion the FCC is making available for broadband grants to deploy broadband at every single school in the United States, and Virginia, I think, is making an effort to partake in that. And so to the extent Fairfax has issues, I'm completely unaware of them, but they seem eminently solvable, especially given that this bill gives them 2 years to implement their plan.
Thank you, Senator. Senator from Arlington.
May I speak to the amendment, Mr. President?
Senator has the floor.
I will just say that if Fairfax County is raising an issue in terms of cost and this requirement, and the Fairfax from Eastern Fairfax is correct, it is one of the wealthiest counties in the entire country. I can't imagine the burden that this might be placing on other jurisdictions throughout the Commonwealth. So, having said that, I am not inclined to support this substitute. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The question on the floor is, should we agree to the floor substitute? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The floor substitute is agreed to. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speaking to the bill.
No, sir, you need to engross and advance it.
I'm sorry, Mr. President, I move that the bill be engrossed and passed on to third reading.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the bill be engrossed and advanced to its third reading? All in favor of the motion will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The bill is engrossed and advanced to its third reading. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Mr. President, I would move that we suspend the rules and dispense with the third constitutional reading.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the rules be suspended and the third constitutional reading be waived? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their votes? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 39, no 0.
Ayes 39, no 0. The motion is agreed to. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County, Senator Surovell.
Mr. President, speaking to the bill finally.
And making a motion to pass it.
And I move to pass the bill and speaking to that motion.
Thank you, Senator. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. So, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I tried to heed the advice of our majority leader the other day and keep it quick, given this bill came out of committee 14-1. But it's clear there's been some questions about it, so I'm going to try and explain it a little more loquaciously this time. Hopefully, I'm going to try and be quick. So, what is an electronic textbook, folks? Listen, an electronic textbook is not just like a Kindle. It's not just looking at a static PDF. When we took testimony a couple years ago, what we learned is there are different species of electronic textbooks that are being used today. Some are very static that you can download in your computer and you can take home and share back and forth. Others are much more robust. They're actually more like online learning systems, where, for example, there are devices today where you can do your math homework online, and they will give you real-time feedback on how you're doing. If you're having problems with fractions, it will say, you know what, it looks like you're having problems with this concept. Click on this link. You can get more. Do you want extra homework problems for this? Or click on this link to get a tutorial video on this. Social studies is getting much more robust. Tutorial videos and things like that. The content is very interactive. These devices are great. Kids learn digitally. Digital learning skills are critical in today's learning. You can't get a job working at a Jiffy Lube without knowing how to use a computer, because you can't talk to a car anymore without knowing how to use a computer. So kids got to know how to use computers. And so schools are starting to transition to that, and they're buying these electronic textbooks and these learning systems to save money. But what they're not doing is they're not giving every child a device by which they can use them both in school and at home. And that's the problem, because our Constitution says every kid gets a computer. So let's just talk really quick about what the bill requires. It's pretty simple. The bill requires basically two things. Number one, it says if a school system wants to use an electronic textbook in a class, not in the system, not in a school, but in a class, they have to give every kid in the class a device, or they have to have a plan in place to ensure every kid in the class has a computer they can take back and forth, number one. Number two, the school system has to have a fat enough pipe into the school so that it has enough internet for every kid in the school to use it. That's the two things the bill says. The third thing is that it allows schools to create a pilot program. Now, what the bill does not do, the bill does not require schools to provide broadband in every home. Now, that's getting easier. For those of you that have Cox or Comcast or some of these other major providers, they actually provide internet today to free reduced lunch families for $10 a month. It's a new program they rolled out. There were some antitrust laws that required it, but it's easy to get at home. But it does not require broadband in the home. Nobody has to provide that. It does not also require a school system to buy computers for every kid in the system. It does not say that. Anybody who says the bill says that is not reading the bill right, okay? There's been some people lobbying this bill in the last 2 days saying things about it, I think. Nobody's come to talk to me about it, but nobody's said anything about it, at least in the committee hearing we had, or said anything to me, okay? So those are the two things the bill doesn't do. I would just note for the body, this bill was vetted heavily. We had about 9-10 hours of hearings over one summer about it. It was heard in committee. We heard from, I think, one person opposed to it, the School Board Association, and that was it. It passed committee 14-1. We have a committee system and a committee process. I think we should honor it, and I would ask the body to pass the bill, and I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Southern Fairfax County, Senator Barker.
Mr. President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, as certainly the body is well aware, we have some achievement gaps that exist in Virginia, with various categories of students not doing as well in aggregate as other categories of students. These tend to be lower income students, some of whom are special education students, some are members of various racial and ethnic minority groups. If we do not pass this bill, what we in effect are asking is to widen that achievement gap. This bill was something that could help us move towards a system where we narrow that achievement gap and give every student an opportunity to learn equally in the process, rather than having the more affluent students be able to have things at home and the less affluent students not have that same opportunity to study at home.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Rockingham, Senator Obenshain.
Mr. President, speaking of the bill,
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, with due respect, it gets a little tiresome to have Fairfax tell us how to educate our kids all over the Commonwealth of Virginia again. And, the gentleman makes good points about what we ought to be striving towards. But you know what? Not every county can do it the way Fairfax County can. Hearing the concerns that were expressed by the gentlelady from Arlington about the capacity of Fairfax County to meet the requirements in this bill, and it's not just to make a plan, it's to comply with the plan by 2019, raises even more significant concerns. If Fairfax County can't do it, how can Petersburg or other counties that struggle, or in my instance, Rappahannock County, that has a very high composite index but very low ability for working folks to pay the expenses of the school system. This removes the flexibility that school systems have to roll out electronic textbooks in a kind of a rotating way. The senator's right. Electronic textbooks may be cheaper than traditional textbooks, but the equipment is not. And if Rappahannock County chooses to buy a few pieces of equipment each year or each month and rotate them among the students, why on earth would we tell them they cannot move in that direction? It does not make sense to take this power grab that power from the localities, and for us to dictate how it is that we're going to allow localities to roll out electronic textbooks and technology.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Northern Fairfax County, Senator Howe.
Speaking to the bill, Mr. President.
Has the floor.
We should have done this 10 years ago. We have lost now a generation of 6th to 12th graders that have not had the connectivity and the ability to use technology. Several years ago when I was on JCOTS, we recommended this. And there has always been resistance from local government. They seem to always be opposed to progress. This is something we can do for our kids to make them competitive. And they have to be competitive not only with each other, but with the whole globe. 3 years ago, or maybe it was 4 years ago, I was in South Korea. Every family is connected in South Korea. Every school is connected. Every child is connected. We are just asking for a minor step forward here in Virginia, because these children are going to be competing with those children in Korea. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. The junior senator from Henrico, Senator Donovan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Speak to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
So I would echo the belief that electronic textbooks and maybe building a library in Virginia have the potential to save us an enormous amount of money and to better educate our children. But this bill does not speak to that. This bill simply says that if a school system or a locality chooses to use electronic textbooks, that those children have a means of accessing that information. You cannot study if you do not have access to the textbook. These school systems do not have to choose electronic textbooks. They don't have to choose it for an entire school system. They can choose it for a classroom. But if we want our kids to learn, they need to have access to the learning tools. This is a very small step in the right direction. It only says if you give them a book, paper or electronic, that child has access to it. And as I understand it, that's in our Constitution. I encourage you to vote for the bill.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Roanoke City, Senator Edwards.
Mr. President, speaking to the bill.
Senator has the floor.
Mr. President, it appears to be a misunderstanding that this bill requires the school boards to do anything. It doesn't require them to do anything. What it does say, however, that if they have text, it should be the policy of the Commonwealth that all textbooks from grades 6 through 12 should be equally accessible to all students. That's common sense. We should be doing that if we haven't done it anyway. And it goes on to say that if they're using electronic textbooks, make sure they are also equally available at school and at home to all the students in that particular course, that particular class. Mr. President, I agree with the senator from Northern Fairfax. We should have been doing this some time ago. But it doesn't add any monetary burden on the school systems that don't want to do it. But those that do want to do it, make sure they do it right and make sure all students are treated equally. So, Mr. President, I hope we would support this bill.
Thank you, Senator. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Quickly, I'm speaking to the bill, Mr. President.
Senator has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Really quickly, just to clarify a couple of things I've heard. First of all, I would hope that no locality in Virginia does what Fairfax does. What Fairfax has done is a disaster. They've used these things, and only the rich kids can look at them, and the kids that are low income can't. And if there's any other system in Virginia that's doing that, they ought to be taken to the woodshed and sued because it's illegal, okay? The Constitution says you can't do it, and so I'm not trying to Fairfax the entire state. In fact, I'm trying to do the opposite and get Fairfax to start following our Constitution. And I think everybody else should, number one. Number two, this bill does not require any system, as you just heard, to do anything to buy electronic textbooks. It simply says, if you're going to do it, if you choose to do it, here's what you do. Third thing is it does not, the only flexibility this bill removes, the only flexibility is a locality's flexibility to break the law, okay? We're taking that away. It's a good bill. It's been heavily vetted. It came out of committee 14-1. I would again move the bill pass.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall Senate Bill 740 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, nor are the senators ready to vote. Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their votes? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 25, noes 13.
Ayes 25, noes 13. The bill passes.
Mr. President?
The senator from Alexandria, Senator Evans.
Having voted on the prevailing side of SB 740, I would move that we reconsider that vote so one passionate advocate could cast their vote.
Thank you, Senator. The question is, shall the vote by which Senate Bill 740 passed be reconsidered? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their votes? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 35, noes 3.
Ayes 35, noes 3. Rule 36-1. The motion is agreed to. The senator from Eastern Fairfax County.
Having explained the bill, I'd move the bill pass so I can vote on it finally.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 740 pass? All in favor of the motion will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Do any senators desire to change their votes? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 25, noes 14.
Ayes 25, noes 14. The bill passes.